Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's March 2026. Want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also want to thank Frank Zappa World for introducing me to today's guest, Bradley Spencer Morgan. Where are you calling from, Bradley?
I'm in Chicago on the north side.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
What is the best thing for a human being
Yeah.
in terms of for themselves or what they can do for the world?
Again, you put the
Ah.
questions into the context you want. So both or one or the other. Any
Well,
way you want to.
I think my answer is going to be the same for both. And I think as I get older and I see how things are going around us, I really gravitate towards Kurt Vonnegut's ethos of just being kind. And I think that being kind is something that's not only helpful to the world around us, but it's also helpful to the world inside of us as well.
Dude, that's totally resonates with me. I forgot to ask you, what year were you born?
1987.
What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I mean, better not. I mean, not rectally. So, no. I mean, there's so many ways to get information. Like anyone else, I read the news online, and as there's the further, conglomeration of media companies, and there's fewer voices and diversity amongst those voices. It's getting harder to trust particular news sources. There was some massive news at CBS News today that was kind of disconcerting. But I think my best way to get information is to read books about particular issues. Because I mean, with articles online, you're getting information, sure, but the larger context and how things fit within, a particular moment or a particular society. I like getting to the details of that in a book, and the granularity is very helpful for me.
Really good. A side joke is in the Saturday Night Live episode with Frank Zappa, when they said, we're going to get you in a Boss Skaggs blow dry hair look. And NBC, you will be NBCing a lot more of Frank, and we're not CBSing you. So there's your current. It goes full circle, right up to date. CBSing you.
Oh, I never heard that. That's really funny.
Oh yeah, it's for real. And I mean, he didn't write that line. Sorry to say. The word you brought up was reading, and another divert is, did you become a reader? One, because your parents told you. Two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
It was on my own, and actually
Yeah.
not that long ago. I really didn't grow up with books in my life. I wasn't a major reader. Video games were my thing throughout my childhood and high school and into college. And yeah, I don't have any memories of my family reading. There weren't, a lot of books, but I had a particular I had a point about 12 years ago where I just had a major personal life change, and I was not sure of what was going to be next for me. And I just I just decided that I just wanted to get some books and just start reading some books, and I fell in with that. And I had this kind of game this first year that I started picking up books, like 2014, 2015, where I wanted to see if I could read a book every week for an entire year. This as like something that just could I do. But I established like certain rules with that. It had to be a book I had never read before, which was not hard because I had not read a lot of books. And if I had read a book by an author, I could not read another book by that same author until this challenge was over. Now, after that first year, I read whatever I want, no rules. But I kind of liked that approach because it gave me an opportunity to try a lot of things and get out of my comfort zone. And I think that was just very valuable to me.
Dude, that's amazing. Two things. One is, there's a cliche revelation. They go, what was the best science fiction era for science fiction literature? The 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. The answer is when you're a teenager. So at Yeah, so it's amazing because it's sort of like with music too. So at 2014, I can't do the math that fast. How old were you when you had this book thing happen?
I was about 26.
26. So you were out of college.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now, three authors. You mentioned Kurt Vonnegut. Three authors or titles that kind of made an impact when you first did that book reading experiment on yourself. Any three that just kind of stood out? Was Kurt one of them?
Kurt was not one of them. The first book I got kind of interested in checking out was a new book that John Waters had just put out. And I was a fan of his films, and he had put out this book called Car Sick, where it's three segments. The first is he's hitchhiking across the United States, but it's a fictionalized story where everything goes right. And the second part is him hitchhiking across the country in a fictionalized story where everything goes wrong. And then the third part was what really happened. And then from there, the next book I had read that had a major impact on me was I read a book called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, who was a very poor rural Southern Black woman whose cells uniquely replicate, and they've become the basis for just any type of medical or scientific testing over the last 60 to 70 years. And she died in obscurity and, not understanding how, much societal and scientific progress was made using her cells. And that was a very eye-opening book for me.
That's nonfiction.
It is nonfiction. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the first Waters is sort of a combination of fiction and nonfiction.
Yep.
Both. Okay, good. Well, now what's the third one?
And I think the third one that probably had a major impact on me, I'm gonna look over around. I think Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath.
Okay, that's good. Let's carry on because you really are articulate and concise, dude. I appreciate it. Grapes of Wrath. So, why do you think, back to that word information, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Why do they collect and gather information? There's got to be a certain type of internal biological impulse. We could probably window dress it, in whatever kind of philosophical way we want, but maybe it's just, on a base level, just a type of just consuming.
That's amazing. Here's what most people say: survival. And the next question is, consuming is different than survival, but it kind of covers both ends of the spectrum. The next question is, you kind of answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
Yeah, if it's a type of biological impulse, then it's got to be innate. But I think we have certain things in our society that make it something that may not be necessarily you're conscious of that. Propaganda is a great tool to convey a certain type of information, misinformation, and there's ways to go about doing that. I guess it's just all how you present things.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
I think they can operate independently. You can do something just out of just gut instinct, just impulsively and emotional, and it informs your thoughts. But you can also, your thoughts can also second guess how you feel.
Yeah. Fill in the blank, Bradley. I don't know what I think until I
don't know what I think until I find out.
Find out. Really good. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Can humans think without language?
Sure. Why not? I mean, animals can. My cat does.
Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Bradley, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
This is something I very much actively have tried to work on. I think, when you're younger and you feel less sure about yourself, you kind of tend to try to fill in the space and just to speak, and just to talk for the sake of talking. And I think that when the language doesn't find you, just rest. It's kind of the same advice that like they give radio DJs, that if you need to move on to something else, you just stop and pause.
It's really good. Pascal said, I think it was Pascal said, all the problems in the world could be solved if you can sit in the room and just be quiet.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa was a guest DJ in Pasadena once, many years ago, and he played a record skip for 17 minutes.
Really? I didn't know that story. That's
to me, that's the ultimate Frank. And the other radio stations called up and said, dude, your record skip. And he goes, we know, we're doing it on purpose. So that's sort of like rest. Like you said, DJ, calm, silence. I actually get that answer sometime and I'm blown away. What do you do when language breaks down? Quiet, silence, pause. You said rest. Really good. Your observations, Bradley, of humans in general. Are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think we're more feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were more thinking beings, I don't think we'd have a lot of the problems we have today.
Yeah. But you notice how you answer is 80% of people go, I think we're more feeling.
Oh,
They literally, funny. Yeah, it is. It's a funny irony. Now, you can't separate feeling from thinking, but we think we can because we invented the words. Bridget Bardot,
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, but Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Or people who meditate go, okay, now think about not thinking. In this one, right. I'm curious. One more, and I'm curious.
Well, I'd rather feel Bridget Bardot than think Bridget Bardot.
You're a man after similar. Okay, but there's a bumper sticker on a car on my street, and I'm curious your thoughts. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Well, I don't like bumper stickers on cars, so it just nullifies that for me. And I guess I more subscribe to the Fran Lebowitz quote, think before you speak and speak before you think, or maybe I just messed that up. People can Google that.
Think before you speak. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they know. The thing about quotes is I'm not after accurate quotes. I'm after how people remember them. And I'm after quotes, how you reinvent them and how you rethink them,
Yeah, and that's a very interesting thing too, because I think about that in terms of how feelings or ideas and our interpretations of that can reinforce myths. And with a couple of my books, it's kind of a central core of just addressing cultural myths.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's perfect. I'm not certain you read it, but probably the greatest Zappa interview ever. I was lucky to be there. It's by Bob Marshall. We were there for 7 hours. It's a three. Have you ever read the Bob Marshall Zappa interview?
Not in its entirety, but it's referenced in the
book. Yeah, good. Oh, you referenced your book. Yeah. Bob had a great line once. He said, and this is rewording, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. That's Warhol. He updated it to everyone will have privacy for 15 minutes. And it still holds up.
That long? 15 minutes?
But again, it's an amazing thing how we take what you said, a cultural myth. You take an aphorism, You think it has this gem of knowledge, and it might, and it's good, but how do you apply it to your life, and how do you reinvent it or take it farther? Like standing on the shoulders of giants and looking farther, that sort of, we don't settle for, it's difference between rooted and retro. So
Yeah, it's all about the venue and how you use it. It's funny, the standing on the shoulders of giants, because I only really see that quote used on LinkedIn, and it just grosses me out, the implication.
right. And then they get slipped into but it's the venue that grosses you out. It's not the quote. If the quote came to you from one of your Zappa researches, maybe you would have liked it, or you would have resonated with it.
Oh, it's all context. I mean, when people react to what people are saying, they're generally not reacting to what is being said. They're reacting to who's saying it.
Yeah. Smart man. Okay. I really appreciate your time here, Bradley. The 2 questions from Alan Turing. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I think that would have to depend on what I think a soul may be. And I don't necessarily mean of like any kind of like spiritual sense or anything, but if we're trying to think of this as a soul being this undefinable internal presence, whether or not you can call it your conscience or what have you, can you repeat that question again? Yeah.
Is thinking a function of the soul?
Yeah. So I think, just the fact that we have our own ability to make decisions and have free will against whatever else our body may tell us. I mean, we got the Darwin Award. I mean, people put themselves in situations that they end up dead, that, any other type of being on this earth that's not human would, they avoid, dangerous or high risk kind of situations. And humanity tends to put themselves in that.
Really good. Second Turing. Can machines think?
No. And I mean, AI is a huge thing right now. And one of the big things that really bothers me about this whole conversation about AI, and I'm not an AI guy, and I'm not completely alarmist to it either, but there's a intentional framing of AI that I think is very disingenuous, and it's coming from the people who profit off the proliferation of AI, and they want to convey to you that it's a tool, that AI is a tool like Microsoft Word is a tool or anything else is a tool, and it's not a tool because it has agency. And
Yep.
And I mean, that opens up some doors about, if it does have agency, should I respect it in the same way that I would treat a human being that has agency? I still don't think so. But I don't, some humans have agency, but they're still tools.
Yeah.
So no, I do not think that machines are I don't know. I just contradicted myself several times over, but I don't think of machines or AI as necessarily tools.
It's all right. You were articulate enough. You made your point, and I appreciate it. It's clear. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I think you find meaning. I think you find happiness from meaning.
Well, I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, who's really happy? I mean, anyone who tells you they're happy is full of shit. I mean, there's contentment, and sure, you got various degrees of that, but I don't know what happy means. I think I'm a happy and content person, but I still have my own gripes and issues like everyone else does. And, you could think about those things, but does that make you less happy? It's, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, this is good. I'm for people saying, I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm for tangents, stories, anecdotes. So these are just prompts. So you're really fun. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Well, I think if it's creating it, you're trying to recognize patterns.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's people who think that the world is flat or that the 2020 election was stolen, and they'll look for patterns wherever they want to find patterns.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I'm probably light. I mean, I could think of something and just still sit there.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest? And it doesn't have to be tangible.
I think the tool is grace. And
GRACE?
yes,
What? Yeah, suss that out. What does that mean?
I think that we need to utilize grace more often to transcend a lot of the issues that we are having in our society these days, especially against. I mean, it's hard. It's I mean, I could talk about like specific examples of things if prompted, but I feel like we're in a very eye for an eye retaliatory existence right now, and I think that if we can just afford each other some grace and recognize the large systems or institutions that are having detrimental effects on our lives, and be understanding to how people could fall victim to those things, because these are large powerful things, then I think that's rather eye-opening. I guess maybe if I want, we're kind of, I'm speaking generalities here, but I don't know how you want to get, how deep you want to get on a political discussion, but I think that if we offer grace to people who have been misled or misinformed, I think it helps us progress more as a society than if we further divide us even more. I think of this book by Dr. Timothy Snyder called On Tyranny, because he did a follow-up book called On Freedom that's a little longer. And On Tyranny it's published in two forms. It's a very short book on its own, but they also did like a graphic version of that, and it's basically 20 rules to consider with the encroachment of authoritarianism and fascism. And one of the things that really kind of stuck with me there is that authoritarian systems and fascist systems rule when they can divide every type of connection that you have in your life, and especially blood connections, family, that the division of that is a way to further their power and their influence over everything else. And those are the kind of systems where I think that we could apply grace at. We all have those people in our family who are difficult, but I really work on trying to afford them grace and understanding in some cases.
Bradley, that really resonates with me, and I never have used that word, and I love it as a tool. Really, really good, especially with No Kings coming up this Saturday. Listen, where'd you get that from? More from the way your parents raised you, or more on your own? That you would answer that question with the word grace.
Bono.
Wait, you didn't get it from your parents. You got it specifically from Bono. That is amazing. Very good. And I'm sure he got it from James Joyce, so all the power to you. One of the great Ramones wannabes of all time. But believe me, that was a great answer. And I'm asking you the follow-up is I ask people the tool they gravitate towards. And someone said, well, what about a toy? What's a toy you gravitate towards?
I mean, my CDs and records; those are toys. Those
That's
are,
good.
I mean, or my streaming platform, whatever. Music is my form of entertainment.
Yeah. Good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I tend to sleep pretty easy. I mean, I think I have the same kind of general worries that everyone else has, yeah, just affordability and things like that. I don't have larger existential worries that keep me up. I think about almost because I think about those things a lot as just part of my daily rounds. But no, I have no problem sleeping.
McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. Bradley, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Why are we hiding the?
We're not hiding. They are. It's sort of like you covered Dylan in one of your articles. He said, I'm just a radio antenna, and this stuff's just coming through me. So and it's an unfair generalization, but we, meaning some humans, ignore the deeper messages of artists and musicians. Why? Yeah.
Why? Because I mean, music is very personal. It provides a soundtrack and feeling to special moments in our lives or special relationships or feelings. And that could be very hard for people to share, not just in the sense of being vulnerable and sharing that they feel a particular way, but even sharing to even be understood. There's that fear of, the way I feel inside or the way I think I saw it and the way I think inside are these things that other people can understand. And I wrestle those questions in my books. But ultimately, I mean, we do have a responsibility that when we are faced with something that does challenge our preconceived notions, that we have to grow with that.
Where'd you get that from?
I mean, that's just a general way of life. Yeah.
But from the way your parents raised you or on your own? More.
I mean, it's, I just had this like old memory just pop up, and I was in 5th grade in a very small town in Kentucky, and my teacher had made a comment about, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and there was a student in the class who was arguing with the teacher that that's not true, that's not true, and he said, like, my daddy told me that. And I mean, I just remember this kid just arguing about how does where in what direction does the sun rise and set.
Right, that's good. Do artists have moral obligation?
I don't think artists have any obligation other than to themselves.
What do you think 90% of people answer that question? How do you think they answer it?
I don't care. I mean, I think about, no, I think the guy who's really spot on about this is, and I saw this again the other day, thanks to the algorithm. But there's a great Bowie clip from the mid-90s where he's talking about that you're doing your best work when you're not doing it in the service of other people.
Yeah. Okay, that is good. Service of others, yeah. But what I'm getting at is 90% of people, when I say, do artists have moral obligation? They go, everyone has a moral obligation. And, they go, well, they have an obligation to themselves. Okay, but it's funny because if you study McLuhan and Zappa and Duchamp and these people I've studied for 60 years, they fuck shit up. And that this is what McLuhan was saying, is that artists are anti-environmental. So you talked about that word context, that it's all about context. That's what he was saying. It's not what we invent, it's the environment it creates. So how do you challenge people to help them grow or see newness, anything, have revelations, epiphanies, is you might want to challenge that. So you might, my idea is great art fucks your shit up and says, I can do that, So anyway, Yeah, go ahead.
I'm very interested in how memes kind of inform the culture and spread
Yeah.
myths and certain ideas. And it's always kind of interesting to see like very classic repeated images and then responses to that. And your question brought to mind this cartoon that I've seen hundreds of times online over the years, where two people are staring at a number on the ground. One perspective, it looks like a 6, and to
Yeah.
the other, it looks like a 9, and they're
Yeah.
debating that. And the person, I guess, this cartoon is what is suggesting is that the meaning of something is depends on how you see it,
Yeah.
and I disagree. And I saw a great kind of rebuttal to that in an illustrative forum. They had a third person that said, no, someone painted this on the ground with a very specific intention, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Well, it's like the beginning of one of Zappa's songs. 1 + 1 = 11. 2 + 2 = 22.
Yeah.
That's correct in a way, but you're saying the creator had an intention.
Yes, I always put a lot more emphasis on artistic intent, and that could be a tricky thing, because there are some artists who are special cases whose whole history is bullshit. Dylan is an example of that. Tom Waits is another kind of masterful storyteller in that regard. So you got to take some things with a grain of salt, but I really I mean, in most cases, even without any kind of direct evidence, I'm always going to kind of default to what did the artist say about what this is. And sure, you might have some trolls or or they might be disingenuous in some way, and you could easily sniff that out.
Yeah.
You know.
No, Waits is high on my list. My wife opened for Waits once, and we know his favorite uncle, and he's high on my list of people to interview. But he's interviewed so many times, and he's a master bullshitter. But in the essence, his bullshit is trying to say something. But Dylan's, I love this one. This is my theory, because I've studied Dylan for 6 years. He says, I was in the Carney in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Well,
Gallup, New Mexico.
Everybody goes, he didn't do that. No, he could have traveled through New Mexico, worked in a carny for a half a day, and he's not lying. But in general, it just sounds like he wants to, make it up to romanticize like he does. And so what? So that's what I like, is there's almost this, there's your Dylan article was great, but it reminded me of this line Dylan said: don't ever tell anyone everything you know. And it's like, if me and you met at a cocktail party and I didn't know you had Zappa in music knowledge and I didn't, we would sit there and talk forever, or, for a while. And I'd go, Bradley, I want to know everything you know. And I want to tell you everything I know, and Dylan learned that from the Bible. Now, did you know this one's a great one? Do you know Dylan went over to Frank's house to ask him to produce an album?
Yeah, I've heard this. I know I'm not.
Okay,
is this confirmed in an interview? Because there's a couple Frank things that are like really commonly shared.
It's for real.
This was real?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You can go and watch my video, Frankie and Zimmy, on YouTube. It's a cartoon experimental film that tells a story. But the funniest thing is, when Frank's dog barked at Dylan, he said, don't worry, he only barks at Christians.
Yeah. And that was when he wanted to make infidels at that time. So he'd already kind of got out of that phase, and Frank didn't know it.
Right. But yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. With Frank, I mean, I mentioned Bono earlier, but I always hear this rumor of like Bono wrote a letter to Frank to produce one of their albums, and Frank wrote back like, "Dear Mr. Bongo" or something. I've also seen that attributed to Beefheart as well, like Beefheart calling Bono Mr. Bongo. And then Frank, this quote, I see it all the time, but like, so many books, so little time. I don't think Frank ever said that, and I don't think Frank was much of a reader.
No, he was a reader. When they did the auction, there was a Crowley book. Okay, so what does that mean? Someone gave him the Crowley book, or does it mean he actually read Crowley? Then kind of Moon hints at or whatever. So whatever. Frank was a reader. He read, where he got Morning of the Magicians. He got Who is Falconelli from. So he was a reader. He puts James Joyce in his list and Ferlinghetti in his list of influences. He was a reader, but eventually he became more of a TV watcher, and he dissed reading by saying it makes him sleepy. He was a reader.
Yeah, that quote, and then the fact that he watched a lot of TV and just worked all the time.
He worked all the time. He worked and he was reading.
But I still think that I've never found a source for that quote. So many books, so little time, and I don't think it's a real quote.
Whatever. The problem with Zappa, you talk about AFKA.net, amazing source.
Yep.
What's missing, Bradley, in Zappa's scholarly archival research is every radio and TV interview, some tech whiz kid should transcribe them all. Those aren't transcribed, and not all of them. Some of them are, but those should be transcribed as well, because everything he did live interviews and everything he did in print is all part of him. But I got to go back to Bono. That's what I heard Devo when they left their cassette in Frank's mailbox. He says, you better go back to the garage you recorded this in. But do you know, I was one of the 6 people that, or there's more probably, but Captain Beefheart, Don Van Vliet, would establish phone relationships with people when he was up in Northern California. Bono, Tom Waits, I think Billy Bob, PJ Harvey, me. So for a year, I talked to Don once a week on the phone in the middle of the night. And really? Bono, and supposedly Bono, I mean, somebody like Gary Lucas or one of the Beefheart people could confirm it, but there were like 6 of them that, and I could go into Beefheart for hours and Waits too. But Mr. Bongo is funny. That sounds like a joke that Beefheart would say to him, once he's talking to him on the phone. Mm-hmm. If you can source out if Bono had a phone relationship with Beefheart, find it out. Him. Yeah,
I don't know,
but I mean, but I mean, you know that world, and I mean, if they ever come across, and you could ask them that, it's worth it. What'd you learn from Beefheart? Because Waits changed his whole. He became a Beefheart wannabe, and check this out. I know this from bass player we hire. He worked for Waits for 20 years. He said Beefheart runs into a Waits recording session in Hollywood, and he goes, "Tom, wait," which means fucking wait a minute before you rip me off. I mean, and believe me, I'm not dissing Waits, saying, this is something he knows. It's like if Tom Waits changed his music on Swordfish because of his influence of Beefheart, all the power to him.
Yeah, but wasn't more Kathleen Brennan who influenced
Swordfish? She turned him on to Beefheart.
Okay.
Yeah, but he admitted in the LA Weekly that Beefheart had a huge impact on his change in music. Right. So he admitted it, and you can hear it. It's evident, So anyways, sorry to go on so many tangents, but see, that's what I like. That's what mine are more about tangents than anything. So that whole, so where we were at, okay, moral obligation. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I think I remember seeing an otter, very young, living in Alaska, just off the coast.
Wow. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, it depends on what the memory is, I guess. Some people don't want to remember anything.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
I can't be choosing favorites like that. They, I
Well,
am.
just a couple then,
Yeah, I mean, my mother and father and all my
Okay.
siblings
Okay. Mainly what you get from your mom and mainly what you get from your dad.
my from my mother, just a youthfulness and creativity, and from my father, discipline.
Yeah. Very good. And did you have older siblings?
I have an older sibling. Yeah,
Is that a male or female?
he's an older brother.
Did he turn you on to a lot of your music taste?
No, no, no. He had. I would have loved my brother to have cool music taste, but no, he was a. I mean, I don't want to disparage artists here, but he was more of like um stuff. I don't even know who these people are, like, but in like more obscure than like Insane Clown Posse, like very
Wow.
that kind of realm.
That band is from my hometown, Flint, Michigan. Insane Clown. That is theatrical rock. I don't know. I never really heard their music. Okay, I got it. Now,
They got. I mean, I've heard some of it from my brother, but they have one song that I will stand is actually a very good song. They do a cover of "Let's Go All the Way" by Sly Fox, and they update the lyrics to basically be this message of, you know, just come with us. We're going to envision this place where, we're all equal, and there's nothing that's going to drag us down. There's nothing that's going to hurt or harm us here, and we could go there together. And I mean, I love that kind of message, that kind of like communal message that they have
yeah,
there. I think it's very inspiring. But yeah, I think, and I think that song came out like 25 years ago, but their cover of Sly Fox's "Let's Go All the Way" I think is a very solid song.
really cool. Thanks for turning me on to that. Okay, so did your parents raise you a particular religion?
I mean, yeah, my father's Christian. Yeah, went to church.
Do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
What would I like to say him to say?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think God's going to tell me what I want to hear.
I know. So, what would you like God to say to you?
I can't conceptualize that.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just you know, I'd have to kind of figure out what God is. Is it just is it a human standing? Is it something in human form standing in front of me, or is it something more ethereal? Is it an internal feeling?
Right.
And is it going to communicate with me in straightforward language?
Right. It's good. You broke it down well. You know what 80%, 90% of people say?
You did your best.
God, you knew it. That's all they want to say.
I think that's all. I think that's. I mean, it's validation. I mean, I mean,
it's
that's a very
validation.
that's a human, very human thing. I mean,
It's a human thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially it's what people want to hear even before they die. To
A
want to
l-
live in a way that will grant them access to the kingdom of heaven.
It's the most amazing thing in my life is when you walk down the street that another human being doesn't acknowledge you by like just nodding their head or saying hello. It's like, does it kill you to do that? Like acknowledgement. I think that's what humans are doing. They're just walking around and say, hey, hi, acknowledge the other human, I think is important. Do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think everyone has the capacity for good or evil.
Yeah.
It's
That's the answer.
it's just the free will and in
Yeah.
the set and in the settings and situation you're in.
Yeah.
And I think we even have to. I even think there's discussion about what is evil.
Yeah. Well, the hidden question, Bradley, really is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I'll set it up. One, Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, I mean, there. I don't know if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. I guess that what that means is that who needs enemies? Just move on and forget them.
Yeah.
Why wait? There's so much more beautiful things to discover and think about than it's easier said than done. But no, yeah, I just move on. I mean, if you're thinking about that from the perspective of just engagement, empowers them. I mean, there's some people that think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, when dealing with your enemies. But I don't care.
But let's go back to your word grace. Your friend comes to you and say, I'm being bullied. What advice would you give them?
I mean, well, assuming you're at a point where where communication's just at a total breakdown. I mean, you can understand. I mean, you could try to understand what the situation is. Maybe you did something that upset them that you're not aware of. I mean, you can try to, figure it out, but you have to decide what the value of that is. You might have an enemy at work and decide, what, I want to try to put this behind us because we spend 8 hours a day around each other. Or you might have an enemy somewhere else that has no bearing on your day-to-day life. And I mean, grace is something that it's in that case, it's not you who needs that. You can afford grace in someone else, and maybe even just ignoring them is a way to afford them grace.
Yeah. Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson said, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? Again, a lot of prompts. The basic question is, does punishment work?
What kind of punishment? I mean, it's this is a huge question here for sure. I mean, we got to be talking. There's a lot of different factors here. I mean, you can't assault somebody and walk away free with that. Now you can look at the possible systemic reasons to have led to someone committing an act of violence, whether they be economic or social or cultural. But once the act is done, it's got to be dealt with legally.
Yeah. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because in those cases, journalism is not in the humanities in the same way. I mean, if we're talking about truth does not necessarily mean fact. You might be getting something from a play or an album or a movie that speaks to something that is just deeper within us. That is a truth. But reading through a newspaper, you want facts and then short context. Truth, I think, if we're going to define it as something kind of more universal and less obvious. I think that's something that comes from how we relate to a particular artwork.
Yeah. So Bradley, walk us through your tipping points, because you chose a career, whatever you studied film in college, and then this 12 years ago you had a personal life change. What was the tipping point to have that life change? Because you became an author and now you're a media arts professional. You're sort of both. Your tipping point to first pursue film and then to pursue media arts and writing a couple books.
Well, I graduated in 2010. I studied film production, and I did some intern work at CMT in Nashville, and I was in Alaska working. I worked as a PA for the straight to DVD movie starring John Voight called Beyond, who was an incredibly nice guy. And I love Midnight Cowboy. That's one of my favorite films.
Oh, yeah. Oops, you froze up there.
And so for the opportunity to have met and worked with, I know he's a kind of a loony guy now, and that's his personal feelings. But working with him, he was just super pleasant guy, and I enjoyed that. And then when I moved to Chicago in 2011, I started working at a video oral history archive that collected video oral histories of historically significant Black Americans. And this was a collection that was done for and then shipped over to the Library of Congress. And then I left that to do another media nonprofit job, and then I lost that job. I got laid off, and then I moved to the corporate sector to pay my bills. And that affords a certain quality of life that is keeps me employed and is great. But my spare time was more focusing on the more creative and artistic side, and I was not getting anywhere with the film stuff. There just was not happening. And so I just emptied that out of my mind and just focused on something else. And then writing became a big thing for me. And now I do film stuff now. I volunteer with a community radio station, and we have a film festival fundraiser that we do that we've done the last couple of years. We're gonna have the fourth one this November, and that's great. And I love doing that. And I would really love to leverage that into something else that could pay the bills and be something more I enjoy that way. But until that happens, I'm going to write my books and do my interviews as my creative outlet until that can happen. If it doesn't happen, then I had a lot of great experiences along the way, and I met a lot of interesting people, and there's a lot of value in that. And for the young man, 12 to 15 years ago, who was kind of frustrated with how his career was going or not going, I don't think he would have anticipated who he became, but I feel really good about where I'm at.
Really good. Okay, so quick side question. Did you see the documentary on Midnight Cowboy?
No, I read the book though. Glenn Frankel did a really great book called Shooting Midnight Cowboy that went into like the source text of the original novel and the making of the movie, and then within the context of the studio system failing away and there being this new, more auteur-driven type of filmmaking. I didn't know there was a documentary though.
Oh, check it out. I haven't seen the doc. I just watched a 2-minute trailer. It's amazing. This film, Beyond, you worked on, who is the director?
A guy named Joseph Resnick, and he had done a science fiction film called The 13th Floor.
Yeah.
And it was also produced by the producer of Super Babies.
Wow. So, really good. So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does the intention play in your creative process writing your books?
That's such a weird thing for Kubrick to say. For someone who's as meticulous as he is and as detailed as he is, I got to call bullshit on that. I think that's just I don't think he means that.
It's out of context, but it's just, look at a lot of these questions I open with cute quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply. I mean, it's basic, but I'm glad you're doing that because I mean, Kubrick is, dude, we could go into Kubrick for hours, but anyways, that's good. I'm glad you're calling him on that. And the same with the screenwriting teacher, saying great art is when you can clearly see the intention. That's like, well, what about ambiguity? Ambiguity is a sign of human maturity, as my friend says. Okay.
Yeah, I think both those quotes are nonsense.
Okay. Now, the question is, what role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing your book?
Yeah. Okay. So now, I got to double back on what I just said there, because you do. I mean, when you are creating something as an artist or a writer, you want to. I mean, with writing, it's different. I mean, it's a different medium than music or screenwriting or film, and so it's not. I don't think necessarily the rules are kind of one-to-one there in books, especially nonfiction writing, which is what I do. You have to be. You've got to be clear about your intention and where your focus is.
Well, I mean, I encourage people to watch 2 or 3 videos on YouTube of you telling your intention about the Zappa book, and you're really articulate in spoken word and your book. So I appreciate that. Now, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your book?
I don't. I mean, I just go in and I guess also that's not true as well. I don't, in the sense that okay. So with the Zappa book, so for your viewers out there, I wrote a book for a university publisher called Frank Zappa's America, and what the book does, it's the very first political study on Zappa, and I did it because for someone for whom politics was so ingrained in his art and his activism, the fact that there had been no study of this, or even kind of a resistance to studying him in the larger culture, I had to be very clear about what I wanted to communicate within that book. But there was a friend of mine who I was talking to about the project, and I referenced this in the book, but he had told me that when I was talking about what the book it was going to be and what I was envisioning for it, he said, the people who should read this book won't. So I wrote this book for critics of Zappa, for people who do not like Zappa. I in my opening, I say this book is not fan service. So even fans are going to be the ones who pick it up and read it. They weren't necessarily the audience I was targeting. I was targeting people who, if you knew nothing about this man, or if everything you heard about him was just made you just ill to your stomach, that's who this book was for.
Yeah. Very good. And again, I do encourage people to watch those YouTube videos. They're really good. And you got some good interviewers, and you being an interviewee. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelids. Maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness or human sensorium does it extend for you?
I think it's just a recognition of our collective humanity. That's really what I like to kind of focus on, in what I'm trying to communicate, is that for all the different aesthetic differences or stylistic differences, that's all just window dressing. I mean, there's really a more common ground in the base foundation, and that's really what I try to just derive from. I joked about Bono earlier, but Bono and his activism in ending the Troubles was very much focused on what do we have more in common that we have against, and I find that very admirable.
Yeah, I want to go into Frank now, because I saw you pointed out a really good line, I think in Broadway, where Frank says, I may be a failure, or I have failed. You
Yeah.
quoted. Yeah. I
So
saw. Yeah, go ahead. Say it. Yeah.
yeah. So for the context, there's a song of original rock music, and it closes with a track called "Jesus Thinks You're a Jerk" that very pointedly and specifically targets televangelists like Pat Robertson, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Oh God, the one who got caught with the prostitutes. Another Jim.
Yeah.
I forgot his name now, but
That's
and you know, this is a man who for nearly 30 years at that point had been releasing music that people had referred to as ugly or as offensive, and he had ideas and things he was communicating in that, and we can argue on his effectiveness of that. But for a man who gets seen as not very humble, there is a moment in that song, Jesus Thinks You're a Jerk, where he sings, if you don't know by now the truth of what I'm telling you, then surely I have failed somehow. And he repeats that line, then surely I have failed somehow. And I just thought that was a very poignant moment and a very rare moment in his discography. I think Zappa's very truthful in his music, but there is kind of this cynical mask that's there. And that was one of the rare moments in his discography where that cynicism falls away.
I'll give you two examples that reinforce what you just said. Because, I worked for Frank for 10 years. I don't know him well, but I had some encounters. And in one radio show when he was doing the PMRC, he was saying, people don't listen to music lyrics. It's just if people listen to music lyrics and most songs are about love, then why isn't everybody loving each other? And a woman called up, talk radio, two-way, said, Frank, that's because it's puppy love. And he goes, you're right. And I heard him personally. I said to him how he interpreted this Buzu Chavez lyric that he stuck in one of his songs. I put a little paper in my shoe, and my friend interviewed Buzu Chavez and said what it meant, and it was different what Frank meant. And he goes, oh, okay. He was willing to learn and understand. In fact, the one I forgot to tell you is I had a guy call up from down south and said they deliver KKK newspapers on my driveway. Frank, do you want a copy? And Frank goes, yes. So it wasn't because Frank wanted to be a KKK, because he wanted to study the enemy. Like the American Indians say, your enemy's your best teacher. He wanted to read this stuff. But it was in Vegas. I saw Frank sing in Vegas once, and he literally sang Broken Hearts are for Assholes and pointing at people, you're an asshole, you're an asshole. And he pointed at himself and he goes, you're an asshole. So, he says, I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure. Bradley, what was the circumstance you got turned on to Frank? What were you listening to growing up? And did it shift? Because, your brother's Insane Clown Posse. What are your peers listening to where you got, and who turned you on to Frank?
So my just like everyone else, a lot of the music I was discovering was in high school. And I grew up a lot in Alaska in middle school, and we get the internet, but it's still very slow. And there's not a lot of like music outlets in Alaska, but in Kentucky, in where I lived, my closest musical outlet that I can go to was Walmart, and just look through CDs there. And I went to a school where people listened to a lot of just top 40 at that time in the mid 2000s. There's a lot of, rap. But what I was listening to, The Clash was huge for me.
I see.
Dylan was very big for me.
Because your parents or Dylan, you just found Dylan on your own? Because that's
no, Dylan's on my own. They put out, there was that Rolling Stone issue of like the 500 greatest songs of all time. Okay. They came out like 03 or 04.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of saw him for the first time. But
yeah,
I have some common musical taste with my mother. But no, Dylan was my own.
What was your mom? Was your mom yacht rock or what?
No, she was very, she was Beatles and Clash and The Cure. Okay. She liked the music that she grew up with and played that, that a lot, and I gravitated towards that. But no, there's a lot of stuff I listen to that just
So you found Frank on your own, or did someone turn you on to that? Because I think you said you started with Joe's Garage.
Yeah, so my parents did have the Joe's Garage CD, but
Wow.
I had asked them about that, years later, and they said, "Oh, because we grew up in a military family. I grew up in a military family, and you move around a lot, and sometimes people just for moving they just give things away, and I guess a friend of theirs gave them a bunch of CDs, and that was one of them. And which is always so distinctive because that Joe's Garage is like that thicker box, and it was already at the end. And this is a name I never heard of before. The cover looks kind of strange to like a 12 or 13-year-old, but no, at college I got to him more, and the very first album I bought was "Shake Your Booty."
Wow. Okay, now did you consume all 60 when he was alive, or you've not?
I've got some gaps. That's the thing with Frank, is that there
Like
are
two-thirds of the 60 or a half of the 60?
I've got most. I mean, my entry and where I gravitated towards Frank is really what I cover in the book. I mean, I got appreciation for all the stuff throughout his career, but there's some areas I'm less knowledgeable about. Like, I don't know too much about like the early 70s Flo and Eddie years. That's kind of thing my gap area. Uncle Meat is another one that I think kind of is like a gap. I think after Rolling It for the Money through Overnight Sensation is my weakest point.
How many Zappa books did you consume in writing your book? Did you just do the research online, or did you actually buy Zappa books and read them?
Well, there's not a lot of Zappa books. I'd actually only read one Zappa book, and that was Electric Don Quixote.
Really? That's the only one you read, huh? No, there's a lot, believe me.
Yeah, I know there's Ben Watson's Negative Dialectics of Poodle Play. I mean, that was just too big. I love Dylan.
That's right. I'm just asking. Yeah. So who are your three?
I don't like reading a lot of books about the same kind of artist. Like a couple is fine for me really at that point. But no, a lot of them were references. And I didn't read them from start to finish like I read Electric Don Quixote, but I went through those books quite extensively, and I think one that probably impressed me the most was Kelly Fisher Lowe's book, The Words and Music of Frank Zappa, that I think it was out of like University of Nebraska Press, published in 2007.
The Words and what?
The Words and Music of Frank Zappa, really? Kelly Fisher Lowe.
I don't even know that one. Words. So who are this is another stupid question. We'll move on. But do you have three Zappa kind of scholars like Kelly Fisher, or the author of Electric Don Quixote, that made an impact on you writing your book? I mean, literally people who have studied Frank. Are there any names? Like you mentioned Ben Watson, any scholars, researchers of Zappa that stood out for you?
I think I relied on all of them pretty equally, but not too much. I really, they were great in terms of contextualizing certain ideas, but I really more gravitated towards the interviews with Frank. And I would say probably not a scholar, but an archivist, Avel Raup in Estonia, who does that AFAK.net site. For me, he's the MVP of this book, because without that resource, this would have taken so much longer. And
have you interviewed him?
No, but I did send him a book.
I tried to interview him and he said no, but I was like, dude, you're like, you did. I mean, it's so clean and cut, nice. And like, the amazing thing is, you want to know, okay, when did Frank mention the word computer? So you can do a search, and it's because of his site, but you can't, like I said earlier, you can't document in text when Frank mentioned it on audio, on a radio interview or a TV show. So that's, you know, when I quoted, I may be a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure. I quoted it because online it says, Steve Vai says, Frank would have said this. And then after my book came out, which isn't about Frank, but I wanted that quote in there, I found the TV show where he said it.
Okay.
And so I was like, holy, you know, because anyways, those kind of things happen. So the two questions I ask you, I would like you to answer in your own words, your feelings, having researched, Frank, because what I do, Bradley, I really appreciate your deep dive into researching Frank, especially at your age. I mean, I know a whole bunch of Zappa people and they study him for 60, 70 years. And it's refreshing when someone does something like you, and you specifically went into a specific part of Frank.
Well, I really appreciate that because I mean the response from the Zappa fan community has been mostly positive,
Yeah.
but there are like two very vocal like minority groups in the Zappa fan community that my book just rubs up against. And
Dude, you know what great art is? Half the people love it and half the people hate it. If everybody loves it, you're fucked. If everybody hates it, you're fucked. If you get somewhere in the middle, you're doing something right. So don't worry.
yeah, well,
So
I mean the way I got to look at this is that you know, and because I just did an editorial for my publisher for their Substack, and about this, where they wanted authors of books to just write something, and I wrote about dealing with very critical Zappa fans of my book. And the way I got to see this is like, you know, I'm no different than any of these other people who come to these tribute shows and see Ray White or Scott Thunes or whoever else, you know, continue this legacy, you know, of a man that's been dead for over 30 years, who I never knew, and we will never know what he thinks today. Like in the grand scheme of things, I'm no different than a lot of the other fans who are maybe theorizing or interpreting his music in whatever way. I'm just the first to curate it.
yeah,
I think I'm the first to curate that information into something that is, I think, more than just social media comments.
yeah. No, it's important what you're doing and what they think. And I have a proposal for a project with you I'd love to talk to you about. But this is two questions because you did this deep dive. I want to ask you your opinion, what you think Frank not would say, but what from your study, how would you answer that? What role, this is the question. What role did intention play in Frank's creative process?
Oh, I think it's very intentional about a lot of things. And I've had experiences with fans who, even when presented his own words, will try to do some mental gymnastics to, you know, get away from whatever the issue is. So as an example, I got challenged. So one of my chapters is on Joe's Garage, and I draw parallels. Back up for a second. So the essay on Joe's Garage is about how that's an allegory for the Iranian Revolution, and specifically Ayatollah Khomeini banning music in Iran. And Zappa had did that as an allegory for the rise of evangelical presence in American politics. And even in the liner notes of Joe's Garage, when he's like kind of detailing conceptually what this setting is, the very last line says, "And if you don't think that can happen here, or just look to Iran." I might misquote that, but the main part is just look to Iran. And a fan who is challenging me on this assertion that I'm drawing connections between the U.S. and Iran asked me, like, well, where did Frank ever speak on this? And I said, well, you can look at these liner notes, and their exact response was, well, that's just a throwaway line.
Well, all you do is say everything Frank said was a throwaway line and intentional. It was both. You brought up two words earlier that he was a pattern recognizer. He studied patterns. He curated them so he could get comprehensive awareness. It doesn't mean his big picture is going to get it the way your big picture is. He's going to get Yeah.
And I'm very aware of, writing this book and just dealing with fans and just having these experiences. It simultaneously has reinforced who Frank is to me, while
Yeah.
also revealing the limitations of my own understanding of him. And, whatever criticism may come from certain fans about this book, ultimately what I want them to know is that we have the same goal here, which is just to elevate Frank,
Yeah.
and I want to elevate him in the public consciousness in a way that I think he's been due, that critics or whoever else have kept him from achieving.
Yeah.
And I did send a copy of the book to Dweezil. I had a friend who had Dweezil's address, and I just like, I'm going to write an inscription. I wrote a very nice inscription here, and I ended it saying, I never knew your father, and I could never know him, but I hope there's something recognizable in this book.
Beautiful. But you never said, did you send one to Moon or Ahmed or Deba?
I emailed everyone. I mean, but
the only one you sold it to send it to was Dweezil.
That's because a mutual friend gave me his
That's
address.
Fine. My friend is in Dweezil's band. I'll ask him if he's even read it. And you've seen Dweezil's band a couple times, or
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is Duchamp. There's no art without an audience. How much do you think Frank was thinking of his audience when he was writing his songs?
I mean, he made claims at various points that he was just making music for himself or what have you. And again, I mean, you ultimately have to do it for yourself. Recalling that Bowie quote I was talking about earlier about, how you have to, you do your worst work when you're doing it in service of someone else. In that same interview, he talks about how you have to remember that at a certain point that you had something that you had to express within you, that if you could get that out there, you could understand yourself better and understand better the way that you fit within the larger society. And that's how I had to approach this book, was just, I had something that I felt that I just had to get out of there, and it was a fever dream of an experience to write that. And because I didn't understand the book until I finished it.
Yeah, no, I've heard you say that in your interview, but you were continuing on what Bowie said. In what I wanted to go back to Frank for a second, right? You said, the worst make so you can understand yourself better. That was Bowie's words, right? Just to clarify. Yeah. Okay. So two things. Frank would say, I write this music for myself. If other people like it, great. Now, to me, and I never said this to Frank, but I've said this a million times, he's over romanticizing, because he knew if he hit these notes and sang these lyrics, kids would buy his records, and then he could make more music. And he lived in a consumer culture. He knew that it was nice. Now, you look at the big picture, Frank's the most unsold out art rock guy ever. He didn't write. And then he tells, the guy, Andy Hallahan, he's taught Zappa at University of Indiana for 35 years in college. And he's really smart. And he has this great quote, which if you can ever find this, I need it. Frank said once, I think all my songs are hits. So the whole story when Arthur Barrow came into the rehearsal and he says, I just heard my friend Christopher Cross's song and it's a hit. And Frank heard it, he goes, I can write a hit. And then he wrote Teenage Wind or something, which spawned, Thundercat. Thundercat's a fucking Zappa wannabe if you listen to him, and he admits it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyways, I think that's beautiful that Frank is saying that. It kind of reminds me of what I learned from another great Joycean and pop culture guy. He said his wife's an expert in psychology, and he says at the end of Freud's life, he said, I'm kind of wrong. It's really more like Jung. It's collective. It's not individual. That psychoanalysis shouldn't be on the individual person so you can get money from this person and psychoanalyze them. It should be on the collective. So again, it's both.
Yeah, the
You know,
collective is what matters, to kind of throw back to the books that had the biggest impact on me. I mean, that's the Grapes of Wrath right there. The
yeah,
subtext that everybody just might be one big soul, as Woody Guthrie wrote in that song about Tom Joad. And with Frank, I was 5 here. I was 5 when he died. So I never got to see him. I don't know him or anyone else, that connected with him. And so I get very, I don't want to, I really resist talking about what I think he would say today, or even some of the criticism of the book as well. You could talk to people who knew him and find out what he would think today. Again, we don't know. But the one thing I think I would say, just my interpretation of Frank as a personality, again, as someone who never knew him, but really focused on the kind of commonalities that we all share. I think his career, for me, the way that I see it, was really driven by, at a certain point when he was younger and just starting out, in envisioning what he wanted to do and how he saw his life at that time, younger. I think that people telling him that his music's ugly, that he's ugly, really had an effect on him. That, well, if this is just how people see me, I'm just going to double down on that. And as like kind of like this insecure defense mechanism thing. Like, okay.
I agree. Bradley, hold on that. I think you're partly true and partly not. I think it's a great observation or not. First of all, I knew Frank. I worked for Gail. I knew all the kids, I know all the Zappa people. I've interviewed all the major Zappa people and know them all. And we know Frank to a point. Mm-hmm. And so you can stop saying that. I didn't know anyone who knew Frank. Now I'm friends with you. I appreciate this time you spent, and I wanted to extend it because it's in 9 minutes. Our 90 minutes is up. I would love to do a part 2 because we barely scratched the surface. So this could be 5-6 months down the line. But when I hit the end broadcast button in about 9 minutes, stay on because I want to talk to you a little more off podcast. Okay. So here's the thing you just really resonated with is Jean Cocteau, the great artist, filmmaker, and he said, when you make your first piece of art and you show it to your family and your friends and your teacher, whatever they say as a criticism, take that, it's beautiful, but you're colored outside the lines too much. Whatever it is, exploit that for the rest of your career. So, it's like Frank's giving his demo to Herb Alpert, and they says him and Beefhearter says something. The feedback would hurt my children. I actually met Herb Alpert once and told him that, and he just laughed. He says, "Yeah, we there's a letter. It says that there's a letter you can see. The feedback will hurt my children or something." And it's like, okay. It's like the MC5, the recording engineers in Motown. He's going, dude, that's horrible. And he goes, that's what we want. So, yeah, there's a combination of that. Frank has a vision. He's a visionary artist, but he's reactionary. I think too much emphasis is him being anti-authoritarian because he got busted. Come on, that's not his. And then he puts it in his lyrics, but that's not. He was an independent thinker. I knew Frank.
Yeah. I did not include that story in the book for that purpose. That I agree with you. That I'm sure it's quite traumatic to spend 6 months in county. I don't want to do that, but
yeah.
I think the impact is overblown.
But again, the other one that just got me the other day is being pushed off a stage. I think it was in listening to yours, and injured so majorly. I know about it for all these years, but I tend not to think of it as this major part. And this is the main thing McLuhan learned from studying James Joyce Finnegan's Wake, which Frank said he was influenced by Joyce, that you can turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. Mm-hmm. You can turn a rejection into a redirection. And, my favorite example is Iggy Pop, he said, my band was so bad imitating the Rolling Stones, we invented punk rock.
I you know what? They're just this week, Afro Man, I have the right to turn my bad times into a good time.
Oh, really? Afro Man. I never heard of him. I saw him on YouTube the other day, so I got to check. Yeah. So you get that. So anyway,
he said that as part of his testimony in court was, I have the right to turn my good times and I have the right to turn my bad times into a good time.
Yeah. So here's a question I would like to end this part one with, because really there's a lot we can go on to part two. You brought up the word truth, and I really want to go into that next time. You know, Shelby Foote said a fact is not a truth until you love it. I want to go into archiving, because I'm making a documentary on archiving, and the whole idea of Frank archiving so that he could make his art with his archive, and not so much so the other people could cha-ching on his archives till the cows come home. So there's been over 100 CDs, all the power to all the people who consume them. I mean, out of the 100 plus CDs that that's been released by Frank since he died, how many have you consumed approximately?
Can you re-ask that question again?
Yeah. Out of Frank released 60 albums basically when he was alive.
Yeah.
Since he died, it's over 100 plus items.
Yeah.
Have you consumed any of those 100? About how many?
I've got that Roxy. I've got that Roxy set there. I've got the 50th of
a couple.
Yeah, I got a couple. Yeah, not a lot.
Yeah, a couple out of 100. And you know, the great point is something in the little Grand Wazoo. He said, "Are you going to release that?" And he goes, "No, I'll never release that." And then they released it. So they disobeyed Frank. So what? Frank's dead. They don't care. I mean, they care, and they do it with quality. I know Joe. I've got to go see Cheaper and Cheap in a movie theater.
Oh, that would have been awesome. That would have been great.
And see Ahmet cry as he introduced it. It was really touching, because it is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful. I've studied the history of Frank's film and video, and I never knew that existed. So I know that's pretty amazing what you can do. But here's what I would like to close out with for a second. And can you go a little longer after we stop, just for a couple minutes?
I'm here. I'm a guest.
Okay.
I really appreciate the time.
Yeah. Here's the question. My friend wrote comedy with Robin Williams. I said, can satire be destructive? And he said, that's the job of satire. And I say, well, if me or you, Bradley, do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. And Frank's great line is, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else.
Yeah.
So what's the function of satire?
I think it's the reveal of that truth. I mean, satire is an element of art, and it's a method to convey that truth that the arts convey.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it is hard because, I mean, you praised that Alex Winter film, and I have, you know, the hardcores have major problems with it. But I say, hey, it's A+ because my one friend knew nothing about Frank, and he goes,
exactly.
I thought that was great. But you know,
right. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's good in what it tries to do, and broadening Frank to more audiences.
But here's at the end, right? But that there's kind of a few major problems, and believe me, I put out so many various emails that, Alex, just let me watch it once before you leave it, release it just once. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll give you some feedback. And that didn't happen. That's all right. He has a vision. He's a dramatic Hollywood dude. He wanted drama, and he got it. Because even Ahmet went on the radio. He gets a producing credit, and he goes, "My dad hugged me." And there's this big thing in that movie that Frank never hugged anybody. And then I interviewed some guy who worked with Frank, and he says, "Oh, Hennings. You ever see P. Fialka, the documentary on Frank? You got to watch it. It's free on YouTube. It's one of the best docs on Frank. P. Fialka. It's a word, yeah, and it's Henning Lohner." And he says, we didn't even bring up the film. He says, "What about that ultimate Zappa hug that you get?" And I was like, wow. So here's someone like Alex Winter giving you the fact that, oh, we're going to make an issue that Frank didn't hug people, when this other guy who worked with Frank said, dude, that was the ultimate, that the way he hugged you, And when I was there for 7 hours with Frank, and he hugged Carolyn Dean, the doctor who sat there with us, he picked her right up, and it was a real sincere hug. So it is an amazing thing, because in that Alex Winter doc, I was trying to get to this, is that one of the Zappa people go, "He attacked everybody on your album, Shake Your Booty. He attacked everybody." Well, that word attack just didn't resonate with me. It was like, well, that's the job of a satirist, but I don't want to use the word attack. There's two words I was hoping you would look up, because you cover this a lot in your interviews about your book. It's called Menippean satire.
I'd never heard of that.
Study it. You can look it up and read about it, because
Menippean?
Menippean. It's Menippius, a Greek guy. It's basically this. This is the best way I could give an example. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's Rabelais. It's Woody Allen breaking the fourth wall. It's the context, the word you used earlier. The context is part of the satire. It's not just, I'm going to make fun of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I'm going to make fun of you so everything you grew up with is Menippean satire. All South Park, they're all Simpsons, everything. I mean, you probably did, but it's all Menippean satire now. But you know what I'm saying. But here's the example I try to give to Zappa people. You're listening. You brought up this song. Do you really want to hurt me? What is that song? He ends with quoting Culture Club. Yeah. He's so gay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Zappa dudes like me are boogieing to this great boogie music, and it's Zappa, and we're like, we hate everybody else. We hate stealing. No, Zappa fans sometimes, you brought them up. I go, who do you like? They go, Rush and Steely Dan. I goes, oh no. So, the Zappa heads are kind of snooty. They kind of hate every type of music, and that's fine, whatever they like. But they're boogieing along to He's So Gay. And then at the end, Frank traps them into singing a culture club song.
That's so funny.
That's Menippean satire, where he tricked you into seeing yourself. How did you know that song, dude? And you sing, I hate Culture Club. Oh, but I can sing the lyrics. Yeah. Okay, Bradley, this has really been fun. I'm going to give you my outro and then hang in there for 1 second, okay? Bradley, I look forward to part 2. It's really been enlightening. I appreciate your time and energy, and your book is outstanding. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Thank you so much, Gerry.